All right. Hello, everybody. We're back. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you've enjoyed the last couple of days off. And let me see. If you haven't bought my book, please go buy my book. It's on Amazon. It's called A Warning from History. It's arguably the best Kennedy book ever written. But who am I to judge, right? So today we're going to be continuing along with Weisberg's Kerry, Thornley archive, and we are picking up at file number, Jesus Christ, where are we at? File number 42. All right, so we're moving in on some stuff that's related to some of Weisberg's investigation into Thornley's and Oswald's Marine buddies, particularly John Heindel. Heindel's an interesting character. Obviously, his name was used as one of the aliases. Heidel, they used to call him Heidel, right? That brings us to the Mac Osborne alias, right? Which will also connect us to the Leon Osborne alias. This is all connected, right? So, this right here is a letter to Jim Garrison from Harold Weisberg. It's dated June 19th, 1968. It says, Dear Jim, the enclosed is for your Thornley file. I obtained it from Hal Verb. Let me explain it. Hal was with me that early morning when Oswald's former Marine Corps mate phoned me to tell me Oswald had a crypto clearance. I had Hal on the phone extension, and he heard the entire conversation. We were immediately anxious to find this guy and continued our efforts until September 1967, when we knew he'd be in Washington attending a business convention of an unspecified kind. That helped us limit it, but there was no time for the careful check of the conventions there that month. Hal asked Welsh to look Thornley up in L.A. to see what he might know about this. The idea was to get the names of all the former Marine associates and one by one contact them until we found the one who had phoned me. The annotations of the copy in his letter are Hal's. When the first words of Thornley's response indicate is that he, without knowledge of what I had then not published, also was aware of the fact that Oswald may have been other than he represented. Okay, so this here is looks like a clipping from a magazine or newspaper. An article, the highlight here is it's from Sylvia Meager. Let me go ahead and read this. It says, Minority of One, 7868, a Garrison victim. In the light of your editorial position on the Garrison investigation into the Kennedy assassination, I believe that you and your readers will be interested in excerpts from a letter which I have sent to Kerry Thornley, a former fellow Marine of Lee Harvey Oswald. As I understand the facts, you were unable to identify John Rene Heindel as the Marine with whom Lee Harvey Oswald conversed in Russian during the time when you were both in the service, thus frustrating a plan to charge Heindel with perjury and or conspiracy, if he denied such conversations with Oswald. Garrison, who had considered you a, quote, friendly witness, then placed you under suspicion of clandestine association with Oswald during his residence in New Orleans in 1963, and charged privately, if not publicly, that you were an agent of the CIA. He produced before the New Orleans grand jury a woman who identified you, more than 4 years after the alleged fact, as the man she had seen together with Oswald in a New Orleans cafe in the summer or fall of 1963. This you denied in sworn testimony before the grand jury. The grand jury did not hand down an indictment, but the district attorney, on the basis of the testimony of his witness, then issued a warrant for your arrest on a charge of perjury. I am further informed that you do not have means to ensure a proper legal representation against charges which appear to result from outright harassment and entrapment on wholly false grounds by an unscrupulous and vindictive prosecutor who is pressing an uninformed, irresponsible, and often lunatic investigation into Kennedy assassination, which threatens to cast into utter disrepute all challenges to the Warren Report, including those which are legitimate, impartial, and scholarly. Such flagrant abuse of trust and such ruthless action against innocent bystanders can only arouse my disgust and indignation. the more so when committed in the name of truth and justice, and abetted by certain of the critics of the Warren Report who supposedly were wholly committed to high principles and the strictest ethical standards. I am enclosed herewith my check for $100 to assist you in meeting legal costs and defending yourself against specious, S-P-E-C-I-O-U-S, I don't know what the fuck word that is, and malicious charges which amount to outright frame-up. I am also sending copies of this letter to a number of persons, including reporters and editors, in the hope that they will be willing to call public attention to your plight and assist you with funds to meet the costs of your defense. You may feel sure that I will use every opportunity which presents itself to make the facts known and to enlist support. Sylvia Meager. A letter published to Kerry Thornley. Interesting, huh? Okay, a memo from Jim Lawrence dated 10/25/68 to Harold Weisberg. Harold, my files yielded a little more info on the, quote, Lee Osborne restaurant story. So let me pause right here. Lee Osborne. Okay, so let's go back to Douglas Jones at Jones Printing. Douglas Jones meets with Harold Weisberg. Harold Weisberg shows him 100 photographs. Out of those 100, he picks out 4 photographs of the man who he dealt with who had the flyers printed at Douglas Jones Printing for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, right? These Fair Play for Cuba Committee flyers were picked up and signed for by a guy named Lee Osborne, okay? So Kerry Thornley, using the name Lee Osborne, went to Douglas Jones and had the Fair Play for Cuba Committee flyers printed, which he then handed to Lee Harvey Oswald, who then handed them out on Canal Street, right? So what we have here is another reference to the alias of Lee Osborne. However, Lee Osborne, if you go through the totality of the Kerry Thornley files, what you'll find is that the Lee Osborne alias is actually a nod to Mac Osborne, who was a person in Oswald's Marine Air Control Squadron unit, right? MACS-1. So, this is Kerry Thornley, who's getting this information on the men from Marine Air Squadron 1 to use the aliases of like Heidel and Osborne from whom he claims is a guy named Bud Simcoe. But we'll talk about Bud Simcoe another time. We've already talked about him before. So, this is linking the name Lee Osborne to a story involving a restaurant. So, here we go. In August of 1963, a man answering a Thornley/Oswald description dined with 3 other men at the Dresden Room, 1760 North Vermont, Hollywood, 665-4294. The waitress recalls that the tab was paid with a Diners Club card issued to a, quote, Lee Osborne. An early 1968 check with Diners turned up only one Lee Osborne at 11834 East Floral Drive, Whittier, 90601. Floral Drive is Kerry Thornley's old neighborhood. The phone directory has no current listing for Lee Osborne at that address, which is an apartment building. The waitress who supplied the initial info to the office is named Doris Coopersmith. I have no address for her, but I believe she lives in the valley. All right, so this is going to be important for a couple reasons. Primarily why I'm going to screenshot this right here and send this to my research group is because here we have a, fairly decent lead that would indicate that Kerry Thornley was hobnobbing it in Los Angeles. Now, the Los Angeles aspect of the story is pretty important, right? When it comes to Jack Ruby calling Al Gruber the right-hand man to Mickey Cohen, blah, blah, blah. You've heard me say all this before. But here we have a potential lead of Kerry Thornley in Los Angeles. Okay, so this is just something to be put on the radar for further investigation. Okay, this appears to be a letter to the editor type thing, or an article in the Tampa Tribune, Sunday, November 24th, 1968. Appears to be written by Kerry Thornley. It says, Lane's facts need checking, referring to Mark Lane. Tampa. While it is entirely possible that the late Senator Robert F. Kennedy had private reservations concerning the conclusions of the Warren Commission, there is ample reason to doubt Mark Lane's assertions. Reported in November 13 issues of both the Tribunes and the Times that Senator Kennedy at any time secretly supported the Garrison probe. As one with more than academic interest in the New Orleans investigation, having been charged with perjury relating to it by Mr. Garrison, I've taken the trouble to check out Mark Lane's statements on this and a number of other subjects. According to all sources except Mr. Lane, Robert Kennedy was deeply suspicious of Mr. Garrison in both public and private. And when Senator Kennedy planned a visit to Louisiana shortly before his death, he took the trouble to request assurance from the governor of the state that he would be immune to Garrison's powers of subpoena. Even Jim Garrison, who questioned about Mr. Lane's stories of, quote, secret emissaries, quote, told an interviewer in the July 12, 1968 Los Angeles Free Press that I would not say emissaries because they did not come straight from Robert Kennedy to me carrying red briefcases or anything like that. In other words, it was a very loose liaison. And according to the very scholarly and objective Warren Report critic Sylvia Meager, the woman who single-handedly indexed the report in the 28 volumes of supportive material, and who wrote the book Accessories After the Fact, Bobbs Merrill, 1967, even Mr. Garrison's watered-down version of Mark Lane's tale of two emissaries is untrue. Mrs. Meager says that figure of speech concerning the guns between Senator Kennedy and the White House was originated by yet another Warren Report critic, Jones Harris, who does not attribute it to Robert Kennedy. Both Mr. Lane and Mr. Garrison are extremely loose with their facts, even on matters of public record. They seem unconcerned when their carelessness harms innocent people, or even when it serves to convince responsible and informed people that the Warren Report critics are generally untruthful. This has caused a growing number of those who disagree with the findings of the Warren Commission, including Leo Savage, Mrs. Meager, J.D. Thompson, David Lifton, Edward Epstein, and others, to speak out against the the distortions, errors, exaggerations, and misrepresentations put forth by Mr. Garrison and his politically motivated followers. In rejecting the findings of the Warren Commission, it is not necessary to accept those of the Garrison probe. If more Americans realize this is a congressional investigation of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, would become a political possibility, since a majority of the people reject the conclusions of the commission. But all too many of them do nothing about it because they believe Jim Garrison's claim that he has solved the assassination, though Garrison himself has admitted that only a congressional investigation can bring the full truth out. Write your congressmen and your senators today, urging them to support a professional and objective investigation of the JFK assassination. That way, Mr. Lane will have an opportunity to repeat a story of the secret emissaries under oath. Kerry Thornley. So, this is what jumps out to me. Number one, Kerry Thornley is extremely well educated on the assassination, the Warren Commission, the critics of the assassination, the names of the people involved in any post-assassination investigations. This guy is keeping tabs on everything to make sure, because he's scared. He's scared that his name's going to pop up, right? Someone's going to come across some stuff, put two and two together, realize he shot J.D. Tippit, right? That he was balls deep in this assassination. He comes out writing articles. November 24th, 1968. This is in the midst of the Clay Shaw trial, right? He's been arrested, but the trial hasn't started yet, right? So this is in the midst of the build-up to the assassination. And Thornley is fucking writing articles. He's giving interviews. He doth protest too much, if you know what I'm saying. So, you don't see Sergio Arcacha or Lawrence Howard or William Seymour writing fucking articles, do you? No. Because Kerry Thornley genuinely thinks he's smarter than everybody, but he's genuinely stupid. This guy's like 120 IQ, and those people are dangerous because they actually think they're smart, and they're not. And that's Kerry Thornley in a fucking nutshell. Just enough information to be dangerous, you know? So, once again, what are we doing here? We're building character development of Kerry Thornley, and where better to find that information than in his own words, right? If you haven't read Kerry Thornley's 50-page affidavit to Jim Garrison, which is located within the greater body of the Jim Garrison papers, you need to read it. You just need to read it. It's a confession. It goes over all the stuff, and it's fucking unbelievable, really. Kerry Thornley is an unbelievable person. Literally unbelievable. All right, so next we have, looks like a bunch of clippings. let me see, some duplication stuff. Let me zoom in on this article and we'll get to it. In the JFK case, photo touch-up charge by Tom Raum, Times staff. This has got to be like, I'm thinking this is the Times Picayune out of New Orleans. Although I can't really tell. Oh, this right here says the Tampa something something. So this might be from the Tampa Times or the Tampa Tribune or one of those papers. Photo touch-up charge by Tom Raum. Did New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison commission a set of deliberately touched-up photographs of Tampan Kerry Thornley to show an alleged likeness to accused presidential assassin Lee Harvey Oswald? The possibility was confirmed to the Times today by Thornley's attorney Arnold Levine. An aide to Garrison has disclaimed any such order. The Times learned of the existence of a letter which was reportedly mailed to a freelance artist in California, bearing the letterhead of Garrison's office. The letter contained a purported request to touch up photographs to make Thornley look as much as possible like Lee Oswald. Thornley, one-time buddy of Oswald, is being persecuted by Garrison on a charge of lying about his connection with the alleged assassin in New Orleans during the months prior to the John F. Kennedy assassination in 1963. Attorney Levine said he has reason to believe Garrison wanted to use the touched-up photographs to support a theory that Thornley posed as Oswald on several occasions when Oswald was away from New Orleans, apparently on clandestine missions. Okay, yes, 100%. This is exactly my thesis on Oswald. Okay, let me reread this paragraph. Attorney Levine said he has reason to believe Garrison wanted to use the touched-up photographs to support a theory that Thornley posed as Oswald on several occasions when Oswald was away from New Orleans, apparently on clandestine missions. 100%. That's what Oswald was doing. They were keeping him out of New Orleans. They were keeping him out of Dallas at times that he was seen in Dallas, like when he was seen in Sylvia Odio's, when he was seen at the Sportsdrome rifle range, when he was seen all over the goddamn place in Dallas. I promise you, he wasn't in fucking Dallas. He was being elsewhere, used on missions clandestinely. By whom? Who the fuck knows? Who cares? FBI, CIA, Naval Intelligence. It's all the same. It's all the same. The Times has also come into the possession of copies of photos which Levine said were retouched by the California artist, as well as another letter apparently from one of Garrison's assistants denying that the district attorney had any intention of using the touched-up photographs in his Kerry Thornley trial. The 29-year-old Tampa freelance writer who served in the same Marine Corps outfit with Lee Harvey Oswald is presently awaiting trial on perjury charge. Specifically, he is charged with lying before a New Orleans grand jury last winter. At some point, we're going to get to his testimony. We're going to read the whole goddamn 100 pages of it. Levine termed the request to touch up Thornley's photograph just another example of the sham of the Garrison's investigation and the charges which have been lodged against the Tampan. The letter asking for a retouch job bears the date of March 12th in the name of Harold Weisberg, a New Orleans writer whom Levine has had a well-known connection with Garrison. Written on what appears to be official stationery, the letter addressed to Fred Newcomb of Sherman Oaks, California, says enclosed are 4 sets of pictures of Kerry Thornley printed backwards, but otherwise entirely untouched. My purpose was to emphasize the resemblance to Oswald and his receding hairline, which, when his hair is combed the opposite of his normal fashion, is quite emphatic. What I would like you to do with one of each pair is pretend you are a makeup man doing the minimum necessary to make Thornley as much as possible like Oswald, for example, by pruning off or brushing back the forelock, trimming the eyebrows, shadowing the chin, etc. I would like you to keep one pair for your use out there, send one pair to me and the other 2 to Jim Garrison. The letter indicates it was typed by a secretary with the initials BB. A second letter dated May 21st, also bearing the BB initials, purports to be from Executive Assistant to District Attorney Jim Alcock to artist Newcomb, and reads, quote, I have just received documents you sent concerning Harold Weisberg's request for you to do some photographic touching up on pictures of Kerry Thornley. So that the record may be set straight, Mr. Weisberg, who is not a member of our staff, made the request without our authority or consent. Further, this office has absolutely no intention of using any touched-up photograph of Kerry Thornley in his trial. Neither Garrison nor Alcott could be reached by the Times today for comment, but a receptionist in the district attorney's office confirmed that there is a typist in the office typing pool with the initials BB. She declined to give her name. The receptionist also said that while Weisberg isn't a member of the staff, he was well known in the office. Weisberg, author of Whitewash, is presently in Frederick, Maryland, the DA's office said. Garrison alleges Oswald, David Ferry, Clay Shaw, and Jack Ruby, working on the fringe of the CIA, hatched the assassination plot while they were in New Orleans in 1963. You know, can you see how close Garrison got with, like, no fucking internet, no Google, and, like, no fucking books written by people? Well, he had Weisberg and he had Mark Lane and a couple other books, you know, but, like, nothing like we know today, right? So, the idea that Garrison could put two and two together and come to the understanding that it was David Ferry, Clay Shaw, and Jack Ruby, who was in the mix, but he was more of the Dallas clique, right? Working on the fringe of the CIA, because he doesn't understand the relationship with the Mossad yet, right? He doesn't understand the relationship with the Mafia. He doesn't understand the relationship between all three organizations, right? He's getting there, but he's not quite there. It'll take another decade for Garrison to get there. Thornley, who has published a book on his acquaintance with Oswald, denies he met with Oswald in New Orleans. No trial date's been set in Thornley's case. So, I'm still amazed. Within 5 years of the assassination, like, Garrison was, like, over the target. Like, he knew about Clay Shaw, Centre Mondial Commercial, Permindex. He eventually knows about the Israelis. He'll come to understand the connection to the mob through, what was it, Eugene Brading, right? All right, let me continue on here. So it appears that the next page has a letter from the district attorney along with some newspaper clippings kind of pasted on top of each other. Mr. Fred Newcomb, it seems to be like this newspaper article is like kind of pasted over this letter. I'm going to see what I can read. It's to Fred Newcomb. Fred Newcomb was the photographer in California who was allegedly going to be doing the touching up. And it has enclosed or 4 sets of pictures of Kerry Thornley backwards, but otherwise untouched, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the stuff that we already touched on, this is the original letter. And that looks like all that's relevant from this one here. I might end up skipping over this stuff. The article again. All right, so moving on. File 47. Interesting. We have a telephone call. Re Kerry Thornley, November 27th, 68. As we were preparing to leave today, I got a telephone call from a man whose name I understood to be Raum, who identified himself as a reporter for Tampa paper, and who called, he said, to ask if I had written a letter on D.A. Garrison's stationery, which he then misrepresented. Okay, so now we have the communications back and forth now surrounding the letter that Weisberg's team sent to Newcomb, who they were asking to do touch-ups on the photographs. Now, okay, they're trying to make something sinister out of something that's definitely not sinister. So what Garrison was doing was taking pictures of Thornley, or Weisberg, I should say. They're both working together on this thing, though, at the time. Funny how Weisberg is never mentioned in the JFK film, right, by propagandist Oliver Stone. But it seems as though they sent these pictures out to Newcomb to touch them up so that they could show that Kerry Thornley looked like Lee Harvey Oswald, which is totally reasonable because that's exactly what the fuck they were doing, right? That's exactly what happened. And this is communications basically from the reporters and to Weisberg, and from Weisberg to Jim Garrison, and the rigmarole between the three of them, right? So I told him I was in New Orleans without a typewriter, that my handwriting is illegible, and that, as a courtesy, Louis Ivan had asked a pool of stenographer to type a memorandum for me. I explained to her it had nothing to do with the office, that I had asked her to type it on a plain piece of paper, and that because it was a memo, I had no cause to see it again, and thus, in fact, I never had and had not even signed it. He acknowledged it was unsigned. I explained to him that a number of people believed Thornley looked much like Oswald, that there was a question, could he have been mistaken for Oswald, and that this was what I was checking out. He acknowledged there was no misrepresentation because I had asked only one of each pair of picture be touched up, and that I had even pointed out I had printed the pictures backwards, whereas had I not, it would not have been known. I said, if anything, the artwork was in Thornley's favor and not against his interest, because he looked more like Oswald before the artwork than he did afterwards, to which Realm readily agreed. He said this had been given to his paper by Thornley's lawyer, and I pointed out this had been for special purpose because the incident was quite old and not at all new to Thornley or his lawyer. I explained how they learned about it. He was interested in my interest in Thornley, and I explained it going back to the December 1966 Joe Dolan show and the caller in. Remember, we did that on the last episodes, right? I told him about my subsequent check of Thornley's testimony and Lieutenant Donovan's testimony, and how Thornley's knowledge of Oswald's high security clearance was inconsistent with his repeated statement of Oswald's communism. Raum said Barbara Reed had been represented to him as a practitioner of witchcraft, and he said these words had been used. I then told him of Thornley's close friendship with Barbara Reed and his trust in her until he left New Orleans, which Raum agreed did not jibe with later claims she was a witch. I told him the basis that Kerry claimed she kept a voodoo altar in her home, and told him that on one occasion a replica had been erected in her home for TV use, and with Thornley's assistance. Raum expressed surprise. I told him Thornley and his people regularly represented Barbara as the only or the chief Garrison witness against Thornley, and explained neither Thornley nor I or anyone outside of Garrison's office had any way of knowing. I added Barbara was not the only one who told me of having seen Oswald and Thornley together. I told him of my visit to, and then there's two names, Clint and Grant Bolton, and its purpose. Obviously, we're talking about Clint Bolton. So obviously in this letter, he wasn't sure of the name, whether it was Clint or Grant, but it's Clint Bolton, and Clint Bolton is someone who I need to spend a lot of time on, and we're going to get to Clint Bolton at some point, and I hope there's a goddamn ton of documents on this fuck. Because he's one of several of Thornley's initial handlers prior to the assassination. I told him I assured Thornley of the literary rights to any value I might add to his knowledge, which Raum agreed was unusual and fair, and he readily acknowledged not having been told any of these things. I offered him copies of Thornley's testimony, told him how he could get it from Helen Hartman, giving him her telephone number, and as a touchstone suggested he compare the picture of Thornley given to Open City as Thornley's appearance at the time of the assassination with the actual picture, the commission's evidence, as Thornley Exhibit Number 1. I gave him Barbara's telephone number and offered to answer any other questions he might have or to supply documentary proof of anything I had published. He did not know I had made no charges against Thornley, did not know everything I had published was of earlier vintage, and did not know of the allegations Thornley and Lifton are making. So I told him what they were and showed him they are false. He said they were already past deadline at the time of his call, but that they would print this story in tomorrow's edition. I told him neither Thornley or his lawyer nor anyone else had ever sought me out to ask me any questions about any of this. He promised to send me copies of their stories and of what had been given to him so that I could compare and see if there are any alterations. I told him his paper was being used as a part of a propaganda campaign, and that to accomplish this, gross misrepresentation had been made. I also told him Thornley, when given the opportunity by WLCY, did not confront me, that I had agreed to confront through my wife when he was asked in my absence, and that when confronted with what I had actually said on WLCY rather than his misrepresentations of it, Thornley was without complaint against me. I told him if WLCY could not supply him with a tape of this, I could. He was not aware of the Open City stories by Thornley and Lifton, and was not aware of the numerous errors therein as acknowledged in the errata sheet, for he had not been given copies. Okay, so one thing you'll fucking learn about Harold Weisberg is he's a little bitch. This motherfucker sent hundreds of letters throughout the course of his research that's like, this guy said this about me, and I didn't mean this. He said this, but he took it out of context, and I said that I would do this, and here he's even bringing his fucking wife into it. So this guy's a little fucking sissy bitch, okay? But nonetheless, he gathered all kinds of good shit. So, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of the person that is Harold Weisberg. I've read a bunch of these letters that he's fucking written to people, and he's really just... I don't know how to say it. I want to say he comes off as obsessed, but obsessed is a good thing, right? So, but he's an obsessive, compulsive little bitch. Let me put it that way. You'll see this as we go through more of these letters, on this podcast. All right, moving on. File 48. All right. Weisberg admits touch-up letter, denies connection. This is another article. This is the article by Tom Ram, which we already fucking read. See, there's a lot of duplication of stuff in here. You see, they have the same fucking article in here 3 times, right? So no point in going over that again. All right, a letter to Helen from Harold Weisberg. Dear Helen, just as I was leaving the house Wednesday 5 days ago, this is dated December 1st, 68, I got a phone call from a man identifying himself as the Tampa Afternoon Paper. I understood his name to be Raum. He apparently waited until after the deadline for that issue had passed, and so specified to phone me. He had been spoken to by Thornley's lawyer and given me entirely distorted representation of a number of things. Was kept in the dark about others. He said it was too late for that issue, but could write one, including what I told him for the next days. This is sort of like assuring the readers I stopped beating my wife, on whom I've never laid a hand in anger. He also promised to send me copies of the stories and what he had been given by this lawyer, particularly the picture. He had used, I can't read that. He had used something, Pony Express. Oh, he had he used Pony Express, it would have been dependable. That's kind of hilarious. I have had nothing, because these misrepresentations have a way of being misused over and over again. That being the only side that is heard, I would like to have copies of everything they publish. By the way, I told him how to get in touch with you so he could see Thornley's testimony and the exhibit, including his picture, which Raum then could compare with Thornley's later representation of his assassination time appearance. Has he done this? On Wednesday, I am leaving for New Orleans for a short trip. If Raum sends me anything, he will send it to me at home, and it may not come until after I leave. I think it is possible this was all designed to embarrass Jim. So if you could please send copies there, care of Louis Ivan, I would appreciate it. And I could then give them copies which they should have. Raum was surprised to know that either Thornley or his lawyer had ever been in touch with me about anything. Agreed that Thornley looks like Oswald, and the manner in which I asked this checking be done was guaranteed to prevent misrepresentation or entrapment, and was a legitimate means of inquiry. I wonder what his story said. I challenged him to arrange any face-to-face confrontation on this. Told him Thornley had shunned it, then offered by Bob Rourke, which my wife accepted for me in my absence, and ended his broadcast there without complaint against me. He was even more astounded when I told him the offer I had made to Thornley through his agent, that I would preserve for him all the literary rights to his knowledge if I could add meaning to it by my knowledge of the evidence. There were witnesses to this. He was surprised when he learned the real relations between Barbara and KT, and that KT certainly did know about the awful voodoo altar in her home, having helped her prepare it for the TV camera and show she was working on. I've been to Dallas and New Orleans since last I wrote, going to Dallas right after I phoned you. The trip was very successful. Sorry, I can't go into it now. I'm that far behind my usual rears. Have a good holiday, and thanks, sincerely, Harold Weisberg. So you see what I mean by he's a little bitch? All this back and forth over whether or not Kerry Thornley wanted to confront him, but he never did confront him, so he's going after him to try to get him to confront him again. Like, fuck off! Like, I don't like this guy, Harold Weisberg, at all. All right, let me see. Moving on, we have another letter dated 12/2/68. Dear Dave. I'm not sure who Dave is at the moment. It is now more than a month since we spoke. At that time, you promised you would send me certain things. If you have, I have not received them. If you have not, how am I to regard this? Am I to take it as a sign of your integrity or as its measure? At that time, I gave you a few of the available means of making your own check on Thornley's honesty. For you said you believed everything he said simply because you believe him to be an honest man. You've had more than enough time to do this, yet you are silent. If you have made such a check and it convinces you he is honest, do you not owe it to him, and so declare to me? If you find the contrary true, after all, you have done and said, you do not owe this to me? Question. And what do you owe yourself and those others who are, in effect, linked to you because of their trust in you? See, this seems like a whole bunch of fucking he said, she said bullshit, right? Nonsense. Things are being done that I would prefer to believe you would not be part of. Last Wednesday, I got a phone call from a reporter on the Tampa Afternoon paper. He'd been carefully fed things by Thornley's lawyer, he said. Now, this was well after I spoke to you. It turns out that he had been given a carefully corrupted account, and that he did not call me until 5 minutes after the paper's deadline. I therefore presume a defamation was printed. I also know that if he used what he said, you are responsible for it, for the original misrepresentation, and the threat under which it was obtained were yours. If, once you knew the truth, which would have been obvious to begin with had it been what you sought, you did nothing to rectify what you had done, and you are not then a conscious part of all this? I took the time to talk to you, and earlier I wrote you hoping you would do what you have since admitted you have not done, make an independent investigation. You have failed to consider what you may be doing to yourself and thereby to those who trust you. When you act, you have do what you have done to me merely on Thornley's word, wherein is your position different than that of those on the Warren Commission who wrote its report. Have you ever stopped to think that perhaps it is, as I told you, that I wanted you to be in a position not to hurt yourself? There is another touchstone to Thornley's honesty. I find he and you through your association, and if I correctly recall, actual articulation say Barbara Reed is a practitioner of witchcraft. Aside from whether or not it is libelous, and I think it is, have you independent proof? Have you asked Kerry why he placed implicit trust in a woman he knew was a witch, and only years later decided she was bad on the basis of no new associations with her? Have you asked him how he knows there was a voodoo altar in her home? Why do you not then get in touch with me? I grant my information also comes with partial source, but it is that he helped her erect this altar for a single purpose, a TV show. If that is all there is, why have you been doing and saying what kind of honest man Thornley is? Withal, I want you to know I have in no way indicated those things that are of most interest to me. Hurriedly, Harold Weisberg. So now he's trying to figure out, get to the bottom of why is this guy talking shit when he knows that he shouldn't be talking shit because he knows this, right? This is he says, she said. Goes more to develop the character of Harold Weisberg than Kerry Thornley now, doesn't it? All right, now we have a memorandum to the director of the FBI from the special agent in charge, Tampa, referencing the assassination of President Kennedy. The date on this, December 5th, 1968. Enclosed to Bureau are 2 copies of each 2 self-explanatory news clippings by Tom Round, Tampa Tribune, Tampa, Florida, under dateline of November 27th and 28th, 1968, concerning captioned matter involving District Attorney Jim Garrison, New Orleans, Louisiana, and writer Harold Weisberg. 1 copy of these news clippings are being enclosed for New Orleans and Dallas for information purposes. And that is that. So the FBI was looped in on this he said, she said about Kerry Thornley. And Thornley's wanting to confront Weisberg, right? So the micro level of detail the FBI was collecting after the assassination is just unbelievable. That's why there's so many goddamn millions of pages of documents. All right, now we have another letter. Reference this same childlike drama. December 16th, 68, letter from Harold Weisberg to the editor of Tampa Times, Tampa, Florida, 33600. Sir, this letter is for the record. For to expect honesty or honorable intent from a reporter like Tom Round is to expect love from a whore. That's good. His purpose, as well as the more open one of lawyer Arnold Levine, was propaganda. This is what you printed. It is quite obvious that, after a lapse of more than 8 months, there was no sudden urgency in his printing his story on November 27th. He could have done what is normal with reporters of honest intent and, following normal practices, called me. However, he carefully delayed until after deadline, as he specified in his call. But then he'd have to have the truth. Then he'd have to have had the truth with the falsehood, or no story, no warrant for this smear. His second story is no less dishonest. It is a careful selection of what he could twist to serve as original dishonest reporting, blend with lies. I tell you, I have an accurate record of our conversation and can prove this. For example, Weisberg, sick, did not explain why he was allowed the services of Garrison's typing pool. This is not only a lie, but a deliberate one. 2 paragraphs ahead, he selected that part he thought he could use. Any reasonably bright editor reading this language from the second paragraph of the first story would know his reporter was not dispassionate. The possibility was confirmed at the Times today by Thornley's attorney. My emphasis, apropos of the contrivance of the lead. You see how Weisberg talks? He uses these big fucking words like he's some sort of know-it-all. The guy's a moron. You have to forgive me. I have very little respect for these previous Kennedy fucking investigators. I mean, anybody put 20, 30 years into this and they ain't figured out shit. It's kind of stupid, if you ask me. There never was any such possibility. It could not possibly have been confirmed, and there was no such purpose as that imputed. This seems to make that clear, unless you employ incompetent editors. Tom Rome wrote as the paper desired, dishonestly, and as a propagandist. I prefer to think otherwise, and to have your contrary assurance. Without it, I have to assume that this further deliberate omission of what he acknowledged to be my phone, that checking out any possibility may result in exculpation, and in this case would seem to have, is no less than what you expect of and accept from him. What Raum told me is that Thornley does look like Oswald, more so without any charge in his appearance. Were it not for the lamentable willingness of the allegedly free press to convert itself into an arm of government, our country would be in better shape than it is. This is more subversive of genuine freedom than in those countries where the press is known to be government-controlled, for the people are deceived by the pretense of independence. Good letter. I like it. All right, this is a transcript of a conversation with Kerry Thornley, dated December 27th, 1968. Seems to say in the upper corner, Schoner, Sciambra, Hoch, H-O-C-H. I can't read the names below that. Memo of phone conversation with Kerry Thornley last night. When Gary Schoner told me that the call, Vince Salandria, was deliberately led to believe was from Dave Lifton, in which he was asked to undertake Thornley's defense, was really from Ed Horsey. I decided I should call Kerry because of the other calls, some to me, apparently made in his name. He has a new number under Cara Thornley, C-A-R-A Thornley. It is 8340933. The address, also new, is 2803 and a half Marlin Avenue, Tampa. The old address was 726 South 51st Street. He apparently had heard that this call was by Horsby and not Lifton. He denied making any of the calls to me or those texts to Sylvia Meager. Horsey had told me he presumed Kerry Thornley made and charged to his phone. We then discussed other things, if it can ever be said that one has a discussion with him. Gary, who was working on his doctorate in psychology, found him fascinating, like in a lab. There was the overused interjection of man, an emotional use of pseudoscientific terms as though he knew what he was talking about, and he gradually reached a crescendo on uncontrollable, irrational anger that led to him hanging up. He began by saying that while he did not agree with me, he did respect me and believes me serious and of honest intent. He concluded with exactly the opposite. He began by denying he had ever pinned a red label on Swald, then admitted this is the use to which his commission testimony was put, whatever that means. Of his articles in the men's magazine, he said they were not written by him, that he had signed away all his rights in the book contract, that they did not represent his beliefs, and that he never filed any protest or complaint of any kind after the first appeared. He acknowledged I reflected them accurately, as I do the commission use of his testimony, and he acknowledges he can produce no disclaimer. It is his position this would be pointless. He denies his lawyer took the initiative in going to the paper, says that Raum got in touch with him for confirmation of a rumor, said it is not paying Levine, who was taken as his charity case, which makes me wonder why Sylvia Meager is paying for what Sylvia Meager is paying for when she says she is helping defray his legal expenses. Garrison is a Nazi like Hitler. He defends Ferry actually on the threat to kill the president. This part is what led to his hanging up. Hang on a second. Garrison is a Nazi like Hitler. He defends Ferry actually on his threat to kill the president. This part is what led to his hanging up. Interesting. He finds my writing dishonest when I ridicule the FBI retailing of Ferry's description of this threat as a colloquial expression. He was firm and almost passionate in his defense of Ferry. Not that he knew him. That was immaterial. That's hilarious. So simultaneously, he's defending David Ferry, but he's saying he doesn't know him. Oh, this is great. He says he has copies of a letter, as I have written. He calls them poison pen, but refuses to specify any error, save what he regards as an injustice to Clinton Bolton. I challenged him to cite error in my writing about him, and he did not. He claims I misquoted him, but does not specify, as he cannot. This is an apparent reference to the business of the Oswald security clearance. He denies he has any plans to sue me or ever did, which is contrary to Lifton verbally and in writing. I told him I did not know what Garrison had him charged for, knowing only that it is perjury, not having read any of it and having had nothing to do with it. He said he'd send me a copy of the indictment. I told him it was other things that interested me, and he went no further with this. He comes through as sincerely insane. Yeah, you think? All right. Moving on. Another letter to Helen from Harold Weisberg, and this is probably where we're going to wrap up. Come on, move over already. There we go. Oh, come on. God damn it. I fucking hate archive.org. Really, I fucking despise them. Come on, move, motherfucker. Alright. So we may be ending here if I can't zoom on this fucking thing properly. Zoom in, and fucking slide. Alright. Nope. There we go. Cocksucker. Alright. Dated 12/31/68. Dear Helen, what a way to end the year. I am even busier than usual with a few medical and dental complications to cope with, in addition to those new things I have undertaken. I have read your letters of 12/23, postmarked 12/26, only once. I should read it carefully. But if I do, it just arrived, I'll have no chance of getting this reply out today, which is my hope. First, I'd like to ask you to send copies of each of these people with a note saying that you do so at my request. Sylvie, looks like Penn, Louis Ivan, Vince Salandria, Ray Marcus. I think that's about it. For the record, you should drop a note to, looks like Harry or Barry, possibly Goldberg, dissociating yourself from Hersey in any way. I do not know who or what he is. He phoned me first I can't fucking read that. This is one of the worst fuzzy goddamn documents I've seen so far. He phoned me first, as I recall, 12/3. Most of what he attributes to is false. I had no earlier knowledge of him or his broadcasts, for example. Some of the inaccurate things that would first stick in my mind, or I may or may not have said. I did say that I made an offer to talk to and perhaps help Thornley a year ago last month, and that the reaction to this and what he and Lifton had been doing, both privately behind my back and later in public, compelled me to want nothing to do with them. I am surprised that Rourke never phoned me. It is unlike him. If you do not mind, since I do not know the station, I'd appreciate it if you asked each of them for a sound tape of what he said about me to be sent me. Do you see what you... Okay, like, this guy wants tapes of things that were said about him sent to him so he can hear what people were saying about him. This is not a healthy, fucking psychologically minded person. Period. Let me skim through this to see if it's even fucking worth reading. I have never seen any of Garrison's grand jury testimony, even if he gave it to me in any detail verbally, which I doubt. I have no recollection of it. I do not have a copy of either the indictment or the press release. It had nothing to do with either, despite what they may. If Garrison has ever let anyone see any grand jury testimony, I have not even heard a rumor of it, so I know nothing of the particulars of Thornley's legal troubles. I know his own writing is therein deficient. My interest in Thornley is of his own inspiration, not Garrison's. It relates to things I have never mentioned, especially not to him, Lifton, or Sylvie. While I remain of the opinion that Sylvie is a sincere, brilliant, and dedicated person on this issue, she has an emotional involvement that I think inevitably will hurt her, but that I regret. She can be right about Garrison and not be right herself in everything she has done and said. I have so told her. Neither she nor any of the others understand the relationship between him and me. I think you have a glimmer, and I let it rest there. I can conceive of his legal work on Thornley being inadequate if, as Thornley tells me, he is charged with but a single count of perjury, then I am satisfied what Garrison did is entirely inadequate. Thornley could be, within the meaning of the law, if not the fact, innocent of the charge, and still have what to no one much more serious things to answer to. He has no glimmer of what they are, and I have no intentions of disclosing them to him or any of his friends. I have, in fact, only to a very few of those who I work. When I learned that Horsey had phoned Salandria and asked what you seem to not know, that he'd defend Thornley, I decided to phone Kerry, and I did with this young man listening in on an extension, for whatever my opinion is worth. The something that can be said for Kerry, in short, he simply is not rational. This young man is working for his doctorate in psychology and was fascinated as he would have been in a laboratory. He thinks Kerry is plain nuts. I think you should be on guard. I could see him warming himself up as we spoke. He's astounding. He even defended Ferry and refused to back down one bit when I called him on this. Perhaps it is because he's done something similar to one of the things Ferry did that he takes this position, but all of the complaints he could have made against me, that he restricted himself to the reiterated charge that I had misrepresented and defamed Ferry. Well, do I have to characterize that? He also said that Levine is representing him without fees as a charity case, to use his words. I therefore wonder, as I did to her, to what use Kerry is putting the money and the money Sue gives him for his legal defense to pay his lawyer, or the money she gives him for his legal defense to pay his lawyer. I cannot take the time to comment on all you wrote, but I do appreciate it. I hope you can puzzle your way through my typese and spontaneous syntax. I'd like a copy of the Christian Youth Corps thing you have, please. What he says about a woman telling me he had moved 3 days earlier is true. He never called back. I never initiated any call to him. In each case, I returned the call to the operator number he left. In one case, I got a call from a man alleging he was Thornley at a time he would have suspected I was not where I was staying in daytime. Kerry says he did not place it, and I have no reason not to believe him. Hersey also gave me the Kerry wants to bear it all bit. I do not take the bait. From this one conversation with him, I'd be inclined to put little confidence in anything Thornley says at any time. He began our conversation with expression of his respect for my honesty, for example, and wound up with irrational denunciation and hanging up. He admits he was at least used to frame Oswald. But claims the commission misused his testimony. Okay, this seems to be a goddamn important sentence, right? He admits he was at least used to frame Oswald. Where? When? When did he do this? But claims the commission misused his testimony. Oh, so maybe in his Warren Commission testimony. So we're going to have to get to his Warren Commission testimony, and we're going to have to get to that pretty quickly. So I'm going to, maybe tomorrow I'll put these Weisberg files on hold, and we'll get to his commission testimony for a couple days or a week, and then we'll come back to this. So if you underestimate Kerry Thornley's importance in the assassination, don't. How many episodes have I done on Thornley so far? Like fucking 20? And I promise you there'll be 50 more. We haven't even got started on Thornley. Really, shit. So, let me continue on. We're going to finish this up real quick. He is not honest if he is capable of it and do very dirty things, which includes beating women up. He also lies about them. He is personally, from all I can tell, vile and intellectually corrupt. Like calling the women who befriended him a practitioner of witchcraft and saying she keeps a voodoo altar in her home. The truth is that he helped her build it for a single purpose, a TV show. This little thing should tell you enough about him as a person. He is a very, very twisted, and I deeply regret that Sylvie's passions had led her to in any way associate herself with his likes. I regret this for her sake, not mine. I am little concerned about him and the threats to Sue that he disclaimed and Lifton. Another sick one at best circulates. I do hope they are crazy enough. I'll do what Garrison cannot towards establishing truth. Be more time. What does that say? I can't read it. This looks like it says, be more time. Do not worry. Look forward and better luck in the new year, and do try to keep me posted. I'll be going back to New Orleans before the trial, and I'll be there through it. Because you express confidence in my integrity, let me add that I have not initiated anything against him in any way. All I recall of the Rourke broadcast is the all right ridicule. He was looks like affluent to my face about this, as he asked. And that's where this document cuts off. Let me see where this is going to go. All right, so it looks as though the next document picks up with some more newspaper clippings. And I think this is where we're going to leave off for today. I'm going to go and look through the transcript of Kerry Thornley's testimony and see if maybe we should jump off of this and hop onto that. But either way, we'll be back tomorrow. And if you haven't picked up the book yet, please pick up the book. Go to Amazon.com, and it's A Warning from History by Corey Hughes. I hope you will do that right fucking now. If the book is the central thesis of all this stuff that we're listening to on the podcast. So if you listen to the podcast, but you haven't picked up the book, you're going to be missing out on a lot of stuff. Also, if you're interested in picking up my personal notes, you can do that from buymeacoffee.com/JFKbook. You can also pick up the ebook there for $10. And what else? Oh, I have limited edition fine art prints by Yeti Slang on the cover of the book. They're all signed, hand numbered, and ready to be shipped out. You can pick those up there as well. And if you'd like to make a donation or a monthly recurring donation, you can do that there as well. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll be back tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.